Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It is so good to be here. It is so good to be here, and thank you so much for the invitation and Liliana's very generous introduction. I'm just really thrilled to be here and to be part of this phenomenal lecture series. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. once said that a time comes when silence itself is a betrayal. And in so many ways, this lecture series is about breaking silences. Silences that are used to obscure, deny, and exclude marginalized people, poor people, people who live on the margins of our society, and yet who we remain in silent denial about. And the silence surrounding mass incarceration is one that I am desperate to break. I have to say that really this work that I have been engaged in over the last several years has become the passion of my life, trying to find ways to break silences in communities all across this country. And I've come to wonder whether we've been silent or simply asleep. Dr. King once said there is, quote, nothing more tragic than to sleep through a revolution, end quote. And he was talking at that time about a profound moral revolution that was underway, a struggle for the recognition of the value and dignity of all humankind, a struggle to end what was then America's latest caste system known as Jim Crow. And he told his audience the story of Rip Van Winkle, who fell asleep for 20 years. When he began his extended nap, there was a sign posted on a nearby inn that had a picture of King George III emblazoned on it. When Rip Van Winkle awoke a couple decades later, the sign had a picture of George Washington on it. And Dr. King told the audience that the most striking fact about Rip was not that he had slept for 20 years, but that he had slept through a revolution. He said, quote, there are all too many people who, in some great period of social change, failed to achieve the new mental outlooks that the new situation demands. Well, I think his words are as relevant today as they were back then. Many of us, myself included, have slept through a revolution, actually a counter-revolution. It is a counter-revolution that has blown back so much of the progress that Dr. King and so many other advocates risked and ultimately gave their lives for. This revolution has occurred with barely a whimper of protest.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Michelle, for that incredible talk. We have about a half hour to solve this problem, so we should get started. You covered a lot of ground, obviously, but I wanted to start just by sort of noting this moment we're in politically, and we're coming off of these conventions, right, that have sort of completely taken over, at least in the field that I work. Just everyone's attention is just on what people are saying, what gaffes is Joe Biden committing, what did Clinton say, and there's almost like this amnesia about when, especially all this kind of Clinton nostalgia and worship, and Biden, who had such an instrumental role in the laws that you describe and the escalation of the drug war. So I wanted to start by asking you, how do we begin to remind people of this history when people seem so eager to forget it? And also, new generations who barely remember the Clinton administration somehow seem to have inherited this sense of the sort of lovable Bubba and crazy Uncle Joe. So.
Yes. Well, it's a voluntary amnesia. We prefer to remember the good times about the Clinton administration, and there were some. But what's interesting, actually, and Bruce Western, who published a great book called Punishment and Inequality, Bruce Western has done an enormous amount of research about kind of the economic status of black men. And one of the things that he found in his research was that black men were actually the only demographic group during the Clinton years who actually saw their fortunes fall rather than rise. Their joblessness increased, their income levels, their joblessness increased, their income levels decreased quite dramatically, and that this was due entirely to the skyrocketing rates of incarceration during that period. And so, although Clinton is actually quite beloved within the black community, I mean, many referred to him as the first black president, you know, and so after he got on, what was it, David Letterman played a saxophone, you know, he was the first black president, and yet he was, you know, he was responsible for ratcheting up the drug war that has had such a devastating impact on black families and communities, and champion the very laws that now keep people really locked in a second-class status. And you know, there aren't very many opportunities to tell this truth in the mainstream media. And so one of the things that I find encouraging is that there is a growing willingness among young people to use YouTube and the internet and blogging and all of this online media as a way of telling truths that aren't readily accepted or, you know, told in the mainstream media. And I hope we will see more of that. On a more discouraging note, you know, in my travels and talking to a lot of different communities about these issues, I have found that many young people will say to me, "What's Jim Crow?" And so it's not just amnesia about the Clinton administration. There is some serious amnesia about our racial history that Black History Month hasn't apparently cured. And so, you know, I think that's actually a place where we have to begin, is helping people understand the relationship of our racial history and those politics to our present.